he prioritizes the success of the overall company and all three teams over just focusing on the success of the 6 team, everything else. But it's wonderful also to see a group of people who are so passionate about racing and racing fans.
Welcome into Backstretch Banter with RFK Racing on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio Channel 90. I'm your host, Chris Childers. My co-host today is the wonderful Mike Massaro. And today we got the president of RFK Racing as our guest, Steve Newmark. I am so excited to talk to Steve. I didn't know Steve was going to be our guest this week. And when I found out, I got a little extra excited because last year when we had him on, it was just kind of really fun to pick his brain from his perspective. We talked to all these wonderful racers that do this every day and kind of look at the business from a certain perspective. But Steve's got to look at it from a whole different perspective, which I think is kind of cool to look at and talk about on the radio with all of you to kind of give you another angle of how this sport looks to people that are working amongst it and in it each and every day. So pretty cool. Steve is with us. Mike, I know we got a lot to talk about.
We do.
We're coming off of Martinsville. We got Darlington up next. And Mike, I mean, our guy Ryan, we talk about it every week. Ryan Preece, impressive once again. That Kroger car looking sweet.
Look, I know I'm biased for a lot of reasons. Not only do I work at RFK Racing, but I'm from Connecticut, where Ryan is from, and I've seen him race, probably since he was 19 years old. So I'm thrilled to see what's been going on with that team. I still believe it's one of the best stories in the sport. I think Steve would probably agree with me. When you think about the fact that this team essentially came together in December and has gelled as quickly as it has, and has been able to perform at the level it has had, is just incredible to me. And, as a former media member, I know that this is a story I would gravitate to. It's a feel-good story. It's a story about a driver and a group of guys who, there may not have been huge expectations outside these walls. I know inside these walls we had great expectations. We expected them to be good. Otherwise, they wouldn't be here. But I think there's folks out there who never thought that this team would perform at this level. And so be it. Here they are. They're rattling off top 10 finishes, 3 races in a row, something Ryan has never done. And there's no signs of it stopping anytime soon. So I just think it's a great thing.
Yeah, no doubt. First, Chris, it's great to see you again.
Hey, Steve.
Sorry to spring it on you that you're going to have to talk more business than pure racing today. But
what, Steve? It's okay, man. I kind of like it. I find the business side of the sport every bit as fascinating and competitive as what the engineers are doing. So it's actually kind of cool. So welcome back.
Yeah, we can cover any topic you want. And if we want to try to, just start speculating on what the setup is going to be for Brad's car this weekend, you and I can give that a shot too. but before we leave, Ryan, I think that, it makes all of us here very proud to see what Ryan's doing, but it also maybe affirms that old adage that good things happen to good people because, Ryan is as good a person as you're going to find in the garage. And, by his own admission, he would tell you his at least NASCAR Cup career has been a little bit tumultuous and maybe hasn't borne the fruit that he had hoped, or he hadn't been able to really showcase his talent. And he never points the fingers at anybody, but it's the fact of this sport is there are a lot of variables that go into success or failure. And so just seeing him thrive in this environment is fantastic. He actually stopped by my office this morning and we were chatting, and he was obviously real happy about Martinsville, but also was lamenting because he felt like he would have been on the pole if he hadn't, overdriven in turn 3 in qualifying. And so he's already focused on, all right, how can I, he was already talking about when we go back to Martinsville in the fall, we've got this opportunity. And it's really refreshing to see that. And I think that, I asked him kind of, what he thought about Darlington, and he said, I'm real excited about Darlington. Then he goes, I'm actually excited about the next few races. And he paused again and he said, I'm actually excited about every race the remaining of this season. I just can't wait to get there. So, that team is seemed to hit in a groove. I think they know that, top 10s are great, but then you got to get top 5s and you got to put yourself in a position to win. So hopefully we'll get that first win with the 60 team sometime soon.
It looks like it's getting close. I mean, there were moments already in the year where he's been up front, he's led laps, he won a stage. I mean, there's been some flashes of brilliance.
Yeah, the one that I think is, and maybe on the business side, we sit there and say the what if you're a driver, you just got to move on to the next one. But if you rewind to I think it was Phoenix, in which he was on a different strategy, had his tire. I think he had been saving his tires, and had about, I think, 0.6 of a second lead or something like that. And they felt pretty comfortable if it had gone green the next 40 laps, that he'd have been in pretty decent shape because of where they were. Maybe Bell was behind him, and obviously the caution came out, and that's stuff you can't control. But we talk a lot here that in order to get a win in a NASCAR Cup race, you have to put yourself in position to get multiple wins, because there are too many things that can happen. And so as long as you put yourself in a position that if things go your way, you can win a race, you'll find yourself in victory lane. So hopefully that's what they'll do here coming up soon, because then it is, as Mike mentioned, it was fairly unique for me to watch that the team got put together so late. I mean, usually your planning is well ahead, and you kind of have, in actually August, you're talking about staffing for the next year. But as that program came together a little bit later with Kroger, and then just basically some stuff on our end that we didn't really get all of our ducks in a row, and some of the staffing of that came in December and January. It's pretty amazing how they've been able to gel and work together so well in such a short period of time. And I think part of that is a testament to kind of what Josh Sell and Brad have done up the street, and that a lot of the people who were moved over to the 60 had already been with us in other positions, and we didn't just bring in outside folks to staff that team. We tried to integrate them fully with how we operate. And so you've kind of sprinkled new people on all three teams and made sure there was some experience, including you look at Derek Finley, the crew chief, who's obviously been with us for a while and has been an anchor in the sport for decades.
Yeah, it's awesome seeing Derek get a chance to be a full-time crew chief and accepting that role and thriving and having a great relationship with Ryan. It really is kind of neat to see it all come together. Steve Newmark is with us today. He's the president of RFK, and there's so much to talk about. Certainly, last week, Martinsville was exciting and disappointing in some respects for different parts of this team, whether it be the 660 or the 17. I'm curious, as the president, how do you handle the dynamics of the mental aspect of the season, or do you let the other guys on the team handle all of this, like Josh or whomever? Because I mean, you got a 6 car that is doing one thing and maybe not living up to its own expectation. The 17's the 17, a little bad luck here and there, and then the 60's overperforming everybody's expectations, all under the same umbrella. You're the president, so how do you handle the dynamic of kind of mentally managing everybody? Because I'm sure everybody's sort of in a different headspace right now.
Sure. I mean, I think it's a good question. I think it's not so much how I handle as president. It's really how the leadership team handles it.
Yeah.
And I remember early on when I came on board, I watched Jack, and I think we were in Vegas, or actually it was Fontana. We had 4 cars at the time, and I think we won the race. We finished 3rd, 4th, and then I think the other car finished, it might have been David Reagan in the 6th, finished 9th. And Jack was not in victory lane, couldn't figure out where he was, and then I realized he had gone to the 6 hauler to meet with David and his crew chief to make sure they were doing all right and talk to them. Even still had a top 10, but they were the quote-unquote worst of our 4 cars. And so he kind of instilled that you always pay more attention and the most attention to making sure the guys that are not doing as well as the other cars are in a good space, and you can help them continue to reach their potential. And so really you try to pay attention to maybe it's almost like when you're a parent and you have kids, 2 of your kids may be going great in school and one of them struggling. So you pay the most attention to try to give them the tools, the resources, and help them out. And I think that's really how we try to approach it here. The dynamic is probably a little bit different in what we have right now, in the sense that the 17 and the 60 are actually in the playoffs if you look at the standings. And like you said, the 6 is just through a bad luck and circumstances and some other things is in a difficult spot. And so fortunately there you have, the head of the competition group, co-owner, is also the driver. And so you can rely on Brad really to kind of keep that team in good spirits. And you just watch Brad even in our competition meetings, and he he is thrilled and excited for some of the performance of the 17 and the 60, and he just keeps a positive attitude. And then I think we're real fortunate to have Jeremy Bullins come over, basically Jeremy's experience, and he's just extremely talented. And so I think we're optimistic that this is an aberration that we've seen. It's obviously we're 7 races in, so there is a decent sample size, but we've got a lot of racing to go. If you actually look at Martinsville, I know a lot of fans will just look and see where the cars finished and go, all right, well, Brad finished, I think it was now 25th.
26th.
I think he moved up one because Eric Jones got disqualified.
No, he was 27th.
Okay, so I should.
But you're right, he did move up one.
I should never challenge Mike Massaro. That's the lesson. So
true story here. We're driving back from Martinsville. My colleague Cole Peterson and I'm writing the recap, and I had it at 27th, and Cole got the email saying, "Hey, look, there's been a disqualification. Our guys moved up a spot." So that's how I know it, because I actually changed it right there and then.
So, all right. Lesson learned for me.
Yes.
So, you look at the finishes and say, Brad finished 26th, Ryan finished 7th. That was a big gap. But if you watch the race, Jeremy and Brad actually did a strategy call where they short pitted. And if the caution hadn't come out, I think the 88 lost a wheel. If that doesn't come out in the next 6 laps, that strategy actually probably propels Brad up to be our highest finishing car. So something as simple as that, which was not something that any of us could control, switched where you would look at it and go, wow, one finished 7th, one finished 26th, where actually it was just a little bit of the luck of the draw, how it happened. So I think that no one is thinking the sky is falling. I'm going to predict that they're going to get a win before the regular season's out. But there's no doubt that it is you have to be sensitive in how you navigate it, because you don't want to overly celebrate some of the successes, because you're recognizing that, hey, we've got a team that is not getting the results that their effort deserves. And so let's figure out how we can help elevate them. And obviously we're going to a good track that Brad actually won at last year. So I'm sure they would love to see a repeat of that. I'm not sure Chris would love to see the repeat of that with getting put into the fence by the 45, but we'll take a win any way we can get it.
Yeah, lots of reasons to look forward to Darlington, for sure.
I'm very excited about this track. I love this track, and I am excited to see what our 3 drivers can do on it. This is a fascinating conversation, and I think about Brad Keselowski as the fact that he's the K in the RFK, and he drives the 6 car, and he's got a huge expectation for himself, and rightfully so. The guy's accomplished so much in this sport, to put himself in a position to even be a team owner. With that said, what is the dynamic like for you as the president of an organization? You're running a business, but a co-owner or somebody who's an owner of the organization is competing. Is out there with the fire suit on. You've been around the sports world for a while. I've talked to you before about, your stuff with the NCAA tournament. Is this very unique, the dynamic for you as a business guy, or has it been as natural as it can be with a guy who has his name on the K of the RFK actually behind the wheel of one of the cars?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I think the answer is almost both. It's definitely unique for me to have kind of someone who wears as many hats as Brad does and being behind the wheel. And I mean, I know it's actually not that uncommon in racing and then actually other sports in the past, but you'd have to rewind to, Bill Russell being a player coach and some of these, older sports to really see that happening. But I think that even though it's different for us at RFK, if you look at our history, we've never had this type of situation. It has actually been very seamless. And I think it's actually worked extremely well. And I think a lot of that credit goes to Brad for being able to take a step back and almost, he'll tell you, and you see his actions, he prioritizes the success of the overall company and all 3 teams over just focusing on the success of the 6 team. And I guess if you were in a business class, they would tell you that, hey, there's some potential conflicts of interest here, and that maybe the owner would try to funnel greater resources to the 6 to help that squad over the rest. And I understand that's a theoretical risk, but that's not what's happened here. Brad, is very concerned and wants all 3 of the cars to be successful, even to the extent, and you can look at our and just how we did the pit crew. Obviously, when we had to shake things up by bringing our third team, we had to, look at how we structured the pit crew, and we wanted to make sure we had some senior leadership on the 60 pit crew and that they didn't just get the youngest pit crew. And so we actually, Brad was the one that led this initiative and said, we've got a lot of senior leadership on the 6 pit crew. Although this may, change the dynamics of the 6 pit crew, let's take one of the senior leaders and go put them and let them be the anchor on the 60 pit crew. And I think that's just one example of how, he's placing the overall success of the company above maybe what might be always best for him personally. And I think that's not an easy thing for people to do. I mean, you've seen his competitive fire, right? He wants to win as much as anybody out there. And so I think we're real appreciative of how he's approached that, and people see that. And so I think that is, most lessons are learned by watching how people act, not just how they speak. And so I think that type of action on Brad's behalf kind of permeates through the shop, and they realize, hey, this is a one-team organization. We're trying to help each other out. And I think that's why you see pretty incredible dynamic between all 3 teams, and it's probably one of the reasons that the 60 has been able to have so much success so quickly is because they didn't come in on an island. They were fully integrated, and everybody was helping. Even though it was a scramble to get that team ready, everybody in the shop was helping to make sure the 60 was in a good position, not just the folks dedicated to the 60 team.
And just to validate what Steve was saying, I've witnessed it. I think it was at Phoenix where Ryan finished 3rd, and Brad did not have the greatest of races, but he still found a way to make his way down to Ryan's car and shake Ryan's hand to make sure he congratulated him on a great finish before he left himself. Now, if he was only thinking about his performance, that probably wouldn't have happened. And on the other side of it, that there's also the dynamic that Ryan looks up to Brad for his knowledge, his experience on the racetrack. I saw it picture day. We had photograph day last week for the team, and for about 5 or 10 minutes, I saw that Ryan and Brad just kind of found a corner to themselves and were having a conversation about, I don't know, I wasn't eavesdropping on exactly what they're talking about, but it was obvious to me that Ryan was picking Brad's brain and Brad was trying to mentor him in a way.
Yeah, no doubt. And so, at the end of the day, the goal is to get all 3 cars in the playoffs. So we'd like to see 3 wins before the regular season ends. So that's a tall task, and I think, but everybody's rowing in the same direction. So we'll see if we can get there.
Rowing in the same direction, and I have full faith that it's going to happen. Chris Childers here with Mike Massaro and Steve Newmark. Let's take a break. We will talk more about this incredible organization when we come back right here on Backstretch Banter with RFK Racing. We're back on Backstretch Banter, Sirius XM NASCAR Radio, Channel 90. I'm Chris Childers. We got Mike Massaro with us today from RFK, and our guest is the president of Roush Fenway Keselowski Racing, Mr. Steve Newmark. We just talked about last week and the results coming out of Martinsville. Let's talk about Darlington this week and some of the great sponsorships. We've had incredible sponsors on the hoods of our cars all season long, whether it's been Build Submarines or Fastenal, who's been a great partner for a long time, Castrol, Consumer Cellular, you name it. We really do have, what I love about RFK's partnerships, they are like some of the most useful and cool partnerships out there, like buildsubmarines.com. Are you kidding me? That's like the greatest website for like a career that is out there to like change the country. That's pretty cool.
I thought maybe you were going to say that you had your own sub, Chris. I thought that was why it was so useful for you.
I love it. So. I love it. Exactly. But it's really cool. Steve, let's talk about Kroger. Kroger has been unique. It's been fun. The cars have looked different. There's a different brand, whether it's been salsa or Entenmann's or something cool to make our mouth water each and every week. I think the wraps have been incredible, but give us an idea. Kroger is a grocery store that is all over the country. I got one within 3 minutes that I was just at this afternoon to get a bowl of soup for lunch. So tell us about how Kroger became so involved with RFK.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. For us, it's hard to overstate how important the the addition of Kroger is to our organization. I mean, just to be blunt, we just had a whole discussion about how wonderful it is to see Ryan Preece thrive, how the 60 came together, how it helped our company grow. None of that happens if Kroger hadn't raised their hand and selected RFK as their partner going forward. Kroger's been fairly iconic in the sport. They probably have the largest, most robust, most active kind of sponsorship program in NASCAR, and they have for many years. Obviously, they decided they wanted to switch, and I would probably it's fair to say that every team in the garage raised their hand and said, we'd love to have you come on board. We were fortunate that they said, hey, we think RFK is the right landing spot for us. And then since then, it's just taken off. And it is so fun to work with a company that genuinely loves the sport. So they obviously, these are big businesses. They've got to make sure that the marketing spend and the programs work for their shareholders and everything else. But it's wonderful also to see a group of people who are so passionate about racing and racing fans. And so that's I think really our whole company has enjoyed, that we get to interact not only with the Kroger execs, but as you mentioned, I think there are 19 different brands, and I may be understating that, some that are part of the program. That's why you'll see Old El Paso one week, Celsius the next week, Enemans the next week. And so for a group that likes to be creative on our end, that allows us lots of leeway to go out and have a lot of fun with different things. And then we get to have, those companies come to the racetrack, and we get to show off what we do. And so at the end of the day, though, I think what makes us most excited is it resonates with the fans. The racing fans appreciate that these brands are supporting the sport that I love, and Kroger's being, I think, the largest retail grocer in the country, gives them lots of opportunity to go repay the favor, and whether it's at a Kroger, Harris Teeter, or one of their brands, to go stop in and kind of basically thank in their own way that Kroger for supporting the sport by making a purchase there.
It's interesting you say that, because that's exactly what I do. And I do that when it comes to anything that I'm committed to as a fan, whether it be a team or a race team or whatever. If I know a company has put in their time, money, resources to invest in that, and I care about it, I'm going to pay them back and thank them. And Kroger is an easy one because we all need groceries. So it's just when you're picking your grocery store, and in my opinion, they're the best one. I mean, it's the biggest, the best. They got the best selection. It's funny because coincidentally enough, I started laughing about this the other day. We like to have taco night once a week, me and my family, and it's always Old El Paso. So it happened to be the day of the race that we're eating the Old El Paso kit, and we went to Kroger, and there's the car, and I was like, how funny is that? And the car looked awesome. So
absolutely perfect. I'm
cool.
curious, Steve, because I don't really know the answer to this. So Tad Geschichter and Jody Geschichter, who used to be car owners, and certainly Kroger was a big part of their program. Tad is now in our building quite often. I'm just curious about the dynamic and how that works.
So it's a great point, and I think, I was actually going to kind of really dive into that, because the grocery business is a lot more complicated than I ever had imagined. And that's one of the beautiful things about being involved in racing, is actually you learn about a bunch of different businesses, because you have to dive in deep. And, quite frankly, Tad is the guru of the grocery business in racing, and he has been for a long time. He built the Kroger program, Kroger Racing, and it's a very, very in-depth, year-long. It goes beyond just racing into advanced marketing, database marketing, all sorts of stuff. And so, Tad really is the engine that makes it work, and he has been relentless. And obviously, he owned a team for a long time, and he told me that at age 62, he maybe didn't need to be worried about buying tires anymore, but he still was passionate about the marketing side of it. And so that's really how our partnership came. It's really a three-party partnership with Tad and his company BAM and Kroger and us. And to the extent, as Mike, you mentioned, that Tad and his agency actually have office space that they essentially live at RFK. And so he is really the driving force, and he's the one that identifies new opportunities and really makes it all go. So we were very fortunate to have a real strong relationship with Tad, and having him kind of continue. He's the one that's out there trying to, bring in as many of the brands as possible to participate in the program.
It's always good to have a high group IQ, and I would imagine Tad brings that.
Well, he raises
up a little bit, right?
He raises ours quite a bit.
What have you learned about the complexities of the grocery business through this Kroger relationship?
You learn that just how consumer behavior is actually genuinely influenced by advertising and marketing, and how you coupon and how you reach out and how you connect with the consumer will influence their buying decisions. And they can, you can track that when we run promotions through the race program, you can track the lift, and sometimes the numbers that he shares that that they're it'll be up in the region 300% purchase for this particular product because of the visibility and the notoriety that we bring when we kind of bring our circus through that region for the weekend.
Are they going to do anything? I remember not long ago walking through Kroger stores and seeing their former drivers on different parts of the aisle and stuff like that. Do we have expanded plans for exciting things with RFK in the stores?
I think that what you'll see is it's usually on a kind of brand by brand basis, that some of them have end caps, some of them may even, put the car on a cereal. And so it really depends on the partner. But I think that what Tad and his group do so well with the Kroger folks is integrating the racing program seamlessly into everything that they do. So my hope is that no matter what type of Kroger store you go into, you'll see some indication of their racing presence in the store, whether it might be on a particular product or it could be in a standee somewhere.
I love that. I think it's really fascinating. I think that the whole business of where they put the standees, what they want you to walk by, all of that, I'm sure you've learned through this partnership. There's so much going on. So it is interesting. Well, Kroger's not the only one that's been a massive help this year and has had a great relationship with RFK. Castrol has been a great partner for a while now. And Mike, I know you released a statement about this not long ago, giving some information on the Castrol 7 areas of performance scheme that is coming up for Darlington this week. We can get into the relationship with Castrol, but Mike, what makes this so unique?
There's just so much of it. I mean, we're honored to be part of their global campaign to kick off this initiative to make folks aware there's 7 critical claims as to performance and protection of their motor oil. Brand new paint scheme for Darlington. It is really cool. They call it a throw forward, so beware of that. But there are some nods to the past, if you will. Brad has talked about how it kind of resembles one of his father's old cars, with the black and the gold. But it's a really cool looking car. It's obviously got the number 6 on it. But if you look close, there's a +1, and that is to draw attention to the 7 critical factors of performance and protection that Castrol is promoting right now, which is just some great stuff right now, and obviously a cool looking race car going to a racetrack where Brad won a year ago.
Yeah, and Steve, I'm sure they've been an incredible partner, and it always helps to look good, especially if you find yourself in victory lane. Like last year, we had that Castrol car in victory lane. I think it was Castrol, and all the confetti on it. So it always pays to have a good rap, and this one is extra special, isn't it?
Yeah, it's different, and I think that one of the things we've had Castrol as a partner a long time with us, and they're different than some of our others in that they actually help us both gain speed for the car by providing the oil and special formulas and lubricants that go actually in the car, and then also we work with them on the marketing side. And what I think we love is when they come to us and say, "Hey, we've got this event happening, or there's this directive within our company that we would like you to help shout from the mountaintops and share with your fan base." And so we've done that over the years with them and done creative things around sustainability, some of the cleanup community initiatives they've taken. And this one, they came to us and said, there are new industry standards coming out for motor oil and that have kind of 7 criteria. And guess what? We're the only motor oil that has proven to equal or exceed in each of those categories. So we can empirically say that, hey, we can check the box in all 7. And so that should actually be good for a consumer, that this is good motor oil to put in my car. And so we like the ability when they come to us and say, how can you amplify that message? Because it's usually pretty easy for us. We can say, look, this is the motor oil that actually goes in race cars competing at the highest level in motorsports, and it's been in victory lane 6 times. So our engineers, who are very picky about everything they do, are saying this helps us exceed and excel on the racetrack. And like you mentioned, it was in victory lane last year. So it's kind of a fun campaign, and you'll hear more about it, but we're grateful for their support both on and off the track.
And by the way, Chris, in case you were wondering what those 7 are, it is pressure, power, fuel economy, high temperature performance, cleanliness, wear protection, and endurance. So there's your 7 critical areas.
All important.
We're gonna
We're
gonna test you on it at the end of the at the end to see.
I've got a
many
cheat sheet.
Promise you I'll fail. Yeah.
All right, but yeah, just so you know, Mike's reading off a list.
Yes,
so,
I have a cheat sheet.
Exactly. But I promise you I will fail that test if we get down to it. As I listen to you talk, Steve, and Steve Newmark, our guest here, the president of RFK, and we can talk about it after the break, but I want to tease it because as I listen to you talk about your job, I almost compare you to a top-level executive of a TV company or a radio company. You're almost running a media business because you have to attract these sponsorships. You have to have a great partnership with them. You're giving them an opportunity to showcase their brand. And you're doing it so it's not like you're trying to please shareholders. You're trying to please these sponsors. It's fascinating. It really is. And I want to dig a little deeper into that when we come back right here on Backstretch Banter with RFK. We're back here on Backstretch Banter with RFK Racing. I am Chris Childers, Mike Massaro. With me today from RFK, and our guest is the president, Steve Newmark, of Roush Fenway Keselowski Racing. We were talking a lot about some of the great sponsorships with RFK, and they've really helped this team grow. They went from 2 teams to a 3rd team, the number 60 car, Kroger, a huge part of that. By the way, this week on Ryan Preece's car will be the Kroger scheme, and it's Country Crock, which I'm sure is going to look really cool. Flying around the track, Chris Bushner's got Fifth Third Bank on his car this week, and then Castrol, the 7 critical areas of performance, will be on Brad's number 6. With all of that said, Brad has had a great relationship. You guys have had a great relationship with Consumer Cellular. They've got commercials. They last year did a convertible where they took off half the car, and it looked awesome. I saw it in the activation zone and the fan zone a couple of times when I went to the track last year, and it was really cool. They've really decided that this is going to be the way that they connect with their audience, with who they're trying to attract. And they've gone all in. And it seems like they have identified RFK as a great partner. So, Steve, it is obvious that Consumer Cellular has been committed. Give us an idea of what they've done for you and RFK and the relationship there.
Sure. And Chris, as you may know, they're one of our newer partners, and it has just been an absolute blast to work with them. I mean, they are open to everything, and they come to us with ideas, and they are happy to be irreverent and tongue in cheek and make fun. And our whole group has really embraced that. And I think you mentioned that one of their key public campaigns is around that how they're half as expensive as other carriers with the same quality. And so when they were kind of brainstorming, Carter Nance, who's leading it at Consumer Cellular, put in front of us and said, hey, I know this sounds kind of crazy and it's probably not something that you guys couldn't do, and we understand it, but could you build a car that doesn't have a roof on it? Could you just cut one of yours in half so we can film it? And so we went to, obviously the marketing group's like, yeah, absolutely, we can do that. And then we all realized that none of us know how to do anything like that. And so we have to walk up the street to the competition guys and kind of hat in hand say, hey, is there any possibility you could build? And they embraced it. They loved the idea. Nice. And then obviously you had a commercial with the crew chief and Brad coming out and, hey, I don't think this will be approved by NASCAR. And it was so much fun. And so that, they parlayed that into this year. And I think you may know, you've probably seen some of the commercials now with, Brad cutting everything in half, wearing half the fire suit, pulling his sleeves off. Thankfully, he's been working out religiously with our pit crew coaches, so he looked like he could actually handle that. But so they filmed that in our corporate offices. And I remember I had gotten to notice that, hey, just as a heads up, they're going to be doing some filming in the offices. I hadn't seen the scripts and everything. So I'm sitting in my office in the morning, and I walk out, and I come around the corner, and I see Ryan Preece and Lindsey Bowman standing next to a water cooler that is cut in half. Now, first of all, we don't have any water coolers in the corporate building or actually on campus, but now you have one here. There are actually no cameras around at this point, and they're literally sitting there. It's cut half off having a conversation, and that was just part of the whole obviously the whole commercial, and they got a lot of great footage. And I think, my favorite part of that, obviously, is when Brad is around what's supposed to be a boardroom table, talking about what we can do to, showcase the half off. And he does it with a hat, and they pan to Chris in the corner with his Fastenal uniform on, and he just kind of deadpans, "Isn't that just a visor?" And Brad quickly responds, "Shut up, Chris." And I give them a lot of credit for their acting prowess. It was interesting. We had a couple people, say, "Hey, how do you think the fan base will react to that?" And I said, we all thought that they would embrace it. And I think it's gotten a lot of positive feedback, just showing that they're willing to make fun of themselves and do it tongue in cheek. And Consumer Cellular just does a brilliant job of conveying their message and doing it, I think, in a very authentic way. I mean, there's no doubt when you watch these commercials and the tie getting cut off, half the door there, you know that they're hitting you over the head that they are half off.
And let's not forget about the flip phone. The flip phone's a big part of the campaign.
That's cool.
I'm sorry. Yeah. I know. This is more of Mike's vintage because I think his first phone was a flip phone.
I go back to the BlackBerry.
Okay, fair enough. So yes, the Brad phone has, and they actually, fans can buy it. And I remember we were wondering, like, is anybody going to buy a Brad flip phone? And you talk to the folks at Consumer Carter's, like, they are selling. There are people out there who are walking around in random parts of the country with a Brad phone.
A Brad phone, yeah. It looks like his car. And it's a high-end flip phone, too. It's not like the flip phones we had back in the day, if you will. I can't remember the exact year, but it was a long time ago.
You don't want to say the year. But everything retro is cool now, so I'm sure that'll be...
I keep telling my kids that because they look in my closet and say, "Dad, you haven't bought anything new."
Just wait a few years. It'll be good.
I love the Brad flip phone. I actually think it's really cool. I would be one of those people if I could get my my wife talked into getting a flip phone. I would be one of those people walking around with it. I promise you that. It looks really cool. And who doesn't want half off? Consumer Cellular, I mean, they beat you over the head because, hey, that's a pretty good thing to sell. I mean, come on, half off. Who doesn't want to save money, especially nowadays with this economy? So love that. I love all the sponsorships. And I think it's interesting because Steve, as president, I alluded to this earlier. Who would you compare to your job? Who would you compare your job to in, I guess, any realm of business? Because, like, you're ahead of a sports organization, but I got to believe it's different than being, like, I don't know, the GM or the CEO or the president of, let's say, the Chicago Cubs or something like that, because you're trying to attract these sponsors that are literally going to be the lifeblood of what you do. To me, it kind of reminds me of television or radio or something like that. But give me an idea of how you would describe the business.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that motorsports and NASCAR in particular is fairly unique when you compare it to other professional sports, the stick and ball sports. Mm-hmm. And we got good comparisons because obviously under our corporate umbrella with Fenway being a part owner, we've got the Boston Red Sox, the Pittsburgh Penguins, Liverpool, and they generate most of their revenue from league distributions and ticket sales. Mm-hmm. Now they have sponsorship, and I mean, a lot of components are important to them, but those are probably the two largest categories where that's a fundamentally different business model than what NASCAR is, where the majority of our money that allows us to race and go do what we do comes from our partners. And so that's really where our primary focus. We do get league distributions. It's just not to the same level as the NFL and NBA. And so it really does shift your focus and, making sure that you're working hand in hand with the partners to try to solve their problems. Now, what is a really nice luxury is every time that an independent group does a study about sports fans, NASCAR fans always rate at the top of loyalty, purchase consideration. So we have all these wonderful numbers to go out and tell our partners that say, hey, if you're involved in our sport and we integrate you into everything we do, that actually has results because our fans have told you over and over again they'll make purchasing decisions based on your involvement in the sport. But you have to be creative because, as you know, Chris, there's a lot of clutter out there. There's a lot of noise. And so you've got to be able to cut through it. That's why doing a lot of these kind of creative campaigns is important for us. But at the end of the day, I'm privileged to be in this job. And I heard Sam Kennedy, who's the CEO of the Red Sox, one time comment that we get to work in kind of the toy department of life. And I think that really is the case. You're in sports, you get, everything that goes in. Now, it doesn't mean that we don't face a lot of the same things that every company faces. You got HR issues, IT issues.
Sure.
Those things are part of running a business. But we are blessed because we get to go compete every weekend. We get to watch, our teams that we're part of race every weekend. And so it's just it is a privilege. But there are days you feel like air traffic control, but you'll take those.
Mike, you probably feel that way, right? I mean, you came from a media side, and now being on a team, working in the sports world, probably feels like you're playing in a toy store a little bit, huh?
I've always felt that way. There's always been a feeling of playing in the play box, right? You don't feel like you're ever going to work. What's different now is that I can have an outward allegiance to one team. I couldn't do that in the past. I had to be completely neutral. Now it's pretty clear. I've got 3 guys to clearly root for every week, and I do. I'm feeling that emotional ebb and flow on a weekly basis like I've never felt before. You walk away and you look at all 3 results, and sometimes you feel good for 1 or 2, and maybe feel bad for the other, or maybe 2 others. Who knows? But you definitely go through the ups and downs throughout the course of the race with 3 different drivers as part of the team. You definitely feel it emotionally as well as you feel it professionally.
It's an interesting sport that way, especially when you have multiple teams, because if you're working in the organization and you could have one team win the race and one team that had a DNF or whatever, so it can be all over the place.
And that has been the case, unfortunately. And when you have 3 teams, I mean that goes with the territory, right? That's odds are that all 3 are going to be in different places in the race.
Yeah, no doubt.
100%. That's a part of the territory. Well, let's take a break. We'll come back. We got one more segment to finish up with the president of RFK, Steve Newmark. Stick around. Chris Childers with Mike Massaro on Backstretch Banter with RFK Racing, Sirius XM, NASCAR Radio, Channel 9. We're back here on Backstretch Banter with RFK Racing on Sirius XM, NASCAR Radio, Channel 90. I am Chris Childers, Mike Massaro, hanging out today. We are going to Darlington this weekend. We are coming off of Martinsville. NASCAR has changed a lot over the last couple of years. We've added Mexico City and Chicago, and all kinds of things have happened, and Steve has been a part of it as the president for this team. And Steve, I'm curious, there's been so much talk over the last couple of years with, what's going on with the sport and who's going where and racing and all that. It has been an evolution. What has it been like for you to participate as an owner, and are you pleased with some of the things that have been done for the sport overall, or not?
Yeah, no. Well, I'm going to make it simple for you. We're thrilled with the direction that the sport is going, but I think we need to really give a full view of why that's the case. Probably rewind. I mean, I think it's fair to say, if we do some kind of self-evaluation, that the sport, we got a little bit stagnant maybe a decade ago or whenever the time frame is, because we were going back and doing the same thing every year. And there's nothing wrong with going back and continuing to do things that work, but we actually have a luxury in this form of motorsports that most don't, in that we have 38 race weekends. That's just way more than IndyCar, F1, and so we have the ability to go experiment and expand and try, and you can do that for a race or two. Now, you don't want to wander too far from your roots, so we still need to make sure, we're going to the Darlingtons, the Martinsvilles, the Talladegas, the Daytonas, and I think we've been able to find that balance. And I say we, and really the credit goes to Steve Phelps, Steve O'Donnell, Ben Kennedy, because they've really been at the forefront and the tip of the spear of pushing and saying, hey, we need to rethink about how we do the schedule, because it used to be every year the schedule would come out and it was the exact same schedule pretty much every year. You might have switched the dates a few, and now we come in and every year there's some new energy. And you look over the last, maybe it's 5 years, we're adding Nashville, St. Louis, the LA Coliseum, Chicago Street Race, North Wilkesboro, Mexico City, and I'm sure I'm missing some in there. But to me, that's the beauty of what the canvas that we have on which to paint, is that we can take a few and try something different. It won't appeal to everybody. There'll be some hardcore old school fans that don't like that. But then we can also say, hey, we're going to Martinsville twice. We're going to Talladega twice. And I think that has worked exceedingly well. And this way you can also experiment. I thought the Coliseum was incredible. I think the first year there were 70% of the ticket holders were new fans. By the third year, you go, okay, we've done this. It was really neat, but let's go try something different. So as opposed to just staying there. And obviously Bowman Gray this year was a unbelievable success on all accounts. And same thing with the Chicago Street Course. I think that's been fantastic, the energy around it. Now, if you said, hey, we're going to do 7 street courses, probably wouldn't have the same feeling. I mean, there's a kind of a limit to all of this, but doing a couple – and I do believe we should be going international. Now, maybe it's 2 of the 38 should be international. Now, I don't know what the exact right balance is, but I do think it's been, fantastic for the sport to have that variety, to inject every year a little bit of a difference. And what is interesting is I've heard from the folks at NASCAR that there are so many different countries that have been clamoring for a NASCAR race.
Oh, really?
Which is fascinating. Yeah, South America.
Is there any place you'd like to see the sport go, personally?
I think it's a great question. I've heard Brazil thrown out a number of occasions, and this, selfishly from a personal perspective, I think that'd be a lot of fun to go down to Brazil, and obviously they've got a long heritage of, motorsports down there. I think that would be fun. But to me, a lot of these locations that are being talked, I mean, you hear that the Middle East would love to host a race. And again, I'm not on the inside of those discussions. I get a lot of it from our, team presidents meetings and when NASCAR shares information. But I think those are all good signs for the sport.
Yeah.
Of course, you're not going to do every one because you don't want to deprive the U.S. fans and the core fans of this very long season. But it's okay to go try some different things. And so I think it'll be fun. We used to go, obviously, in the Xfinity Series up to Montreal, and that was an incredible experience, incredible race. So I think it'd be great to be back up in Canada for a race. And we'll obviously see how Mexico City goes. But I really think that the creativity that NASCAR has been open to, pursuing has been really, really important you look at the new TV deal where ratings have gone. In the most places, stands are filled or almost to capacity. And that's, I think, because of the more aggressive, nimble approach that NASCAR's taken in the last few years.
Now, the upside of going outside the U.S. is obvious. You're building a fan base outside of the existing fan base. Logistically, though, I can imagine that would have some challenges. Going to Mexico City, going to Brazil, perhaps. How would that compare to, say, just going? I'm going to pick a place that's actually kind of challenging. I would imagine Sonoma.
Right. Yeah, logistically, it's a nightmare. And so it's probably very easy for me to sit here and say, yeah, we should go do it. And then, you go talk to our travel coordinator and she say, you're just about to put me through hell. So, there's no doubt that there's some complexities to it. Mexico City, it's going to be brutal on our truck drivers. And I think they all even have to get together in Lubbock, Texas, and get an escort through. So it messes up all of the conventions that we've all gotten used to. And Mike, I think it's a great question. Even where you stay in hotels and all of that stuff changes. And so, if you're going to a place like Brazil, you got to figure out. At least Mexico City, you can drive the cars, or you can drive the haulers and the trailers and put the cars in there. You're not driving to Brazil, and so you're figuring out how to box them up. And there's a whole host of challenges. I'm just confident that there's enough smart people within NASCAR and the teams. I'm not going to be one of them that figures out how to do that. But it's also why if you look at something like Brazil or something, I assume you do it beginning of the season, or it's going to be really tough to do something that's that far where you're in Darlington one week, you're in Brazil the next week, and then you're in Kansas the week after that. But I got faith they'll figure it out, and I think as long as we continue to find the right balance of experimentation and tradition, I think we'll be good.
Well, it's an interesting time. It's fun time with Mexico City and some new things on the schedule. That is all the time we have today. What fun. Great hanging out with Steve Newmark and Mike Massaro. Always a pleasure to have him as a part of this show. Everybody watch Darlington and make sure you root on the 6, the 60, and the 17. And we'll see you next week on Backstretch Banter with RFK Racing. We thank you all for joining us. Thank you.